Well, I think we start back in 1969. He hails from Surrey, and as a lad in 1969, a local archaeologist at Chertsey had his arm twisted by Martin's father to let him help out in a dig, and he's never looked back. He started with the National Trust on a 4-week contract at Corfe Castle, supervising a group of volunteers excavating Civil War debris and demolition rubble. That was back in 1980 something. And 36 years, he's still with them. And I mean the National Trust, not the demolition team at Corfe Castle. And 36 years being with the National Trust, Martin is now responsible for the archaeological advice for National Trust sites across Gloucestershire, Somerset, Dorset, Wiltshire, and particularly relevant to this evening, the Killerton estate in Devon. His PhD, being Dr. Martin Papworth, was concerned with the Duratriges, Iron Age community of Dorset. He is no stranger to Roman archaeology. He directed the excavations at Chedworth Roman villa over an 8-year period. And yet he finds time to be married, and he has 3 children. So we are very grateful for him taking the time this evening to talk to us with particular focus about finding Roman fort at Killerton, because everyone knows the Romans barely got to Devon and Cornwall, or did they? So when you like, Martin, if you put up your screen and share your screen, then we look forward to a very good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'll just do my screen sharing. All right. There. Yes, I've been working at on the Killerton estate for about 10 years now. Devon was a new part of the area that I looked after, but one thing that interested me, in the only 2 bits of Devon that I work in, both at Killerton and at Knightshays near Tiverton, is both sites lie very close to Roman forts. And you know, I'm really being a Dorset archaeology at heart. I was surprised how many Roman forts there are in Devon. So it was intriguing. And but the one at Killerton was always known as the triple-ditched enclosure. It was never, because people, this field that you're looking at here in this opening slide, this field has been ploughed for many years. And when it was first discovered, or from aerial photography, you'll see that it has that sort of playing card shape, doesn't it? It was discovered in 1984 by Francis Griffith, and as soon as it was seen in a particularly dry year, it looked as though it ought to be a Roman fort. But after ploughing, when the field was walked, nothing Roman at all was found. Really, all that was ever picked up in the field were odd bits of flower pot and bits of cider bottle. Now, this area on the Killerton estate, just east of Exeter, there we go back to it there. So this is the location that we're looking at here. Hopefully you can see my cursor and the arrow pointing this spot here. It lies a little east of Exeter, just on the outskirts. And as I said earlier on, this is an area, every single site here, this is a map created by Chris Smart of Exeter University. Every site here is a Roman fort. And in Dorset, there's about 4, and I'll talk about that later on. So it's very, very interesting. And here is the one near Knightsayes, up near Tiverton. So I was interested that suddenly I'd become involved with two National Trust properties that were close to what appeared to be Roman forts, and there seemed to be a Roman fort in this area every 5 to 10 kilometers. So a busy area. So I wanted to know, because the Killerton estate has lots of wonderful archaeology, but it has very little Roman information. This is the one potential Roman site that we know of. We eventually, in 2019, I spoke to the property team, and they were as intrigued as I was. And at Killerton, we have a group of volunteers. In fact, we tried to encourage these across the National Trust. We call them Heritage Archaeological Ranger Teams. And their role is to monitor our archaeological sites on the National Trust properties. But I also encourage members of the heart teams to also carry out research, do conservation work on sites, learn things like geophysics, and if there are excavations the National Trust is organising, learn excavation skills. So Fiona Hailston, who is the area ranger who looks after the heart team at Killerton, she asked whether we could do a geophysical survey there. So in August 2019, we went out to the field with a lady called Isabel Richardson, and she was the archaeologist on the National Trust Killerton and Honeycutt estates, which were given to the National Trust by the Ackland family in the 1940s. And she knew Lady Ackland, and she carried out a huge amount of archaeology across the Killerton and Honeycutt estates. And she'd fieldwalked this with volunteers and found nothing. So we went up there together and we looked at the site, and we looked at the layout of the site. And then we looked at the Google aerial photography. We looked at the aerial photography, and we could see that actually modern photographs too just about show this feature. So it wasn't some fluke or some strange ploughing pattern in the 1980s. It seemed still to be there. So as I say, we got together and we started the survey of where the geophysics shows it. So I brought my tent and I camped up here. And this is the only flat part of the site. The whole site slopes towards the south. But at this top part of the site here, you can see that there's a clear view in all directions. So it's a very good vantage point. So if it was a Roman fort, it has a good position. So this level bit at the very top of the field against the hedge boundary has a really good view out. So I camped up there and realized at the dawn in the early morning what a good position this site is. So this is the Killerton Heart team carrying out with our National Trust our 16 resistivity meter, which is quite old now. Got it in the 1990s. And we walked up and down. We gridded the whole area out in 20-meter grids. We got some quite good results, not particularly brilliant ones, but we did pick up on the top here by the field boundary and the corner here, 3 ditches. And you can see the turning of the corner here. We also used a magnetometer, but unbeknown to us, the whole site had been crossed by a huge gas main sometime in the 1970s. In fact, while we were working on the site, a man came out of a hedge and said, "What on earth are you doing?" And we said, "Well, we're doing a geophysical survey." He said, "Don't dig in the ground," because the gas board monitors this pipeline all the time, just to make sure no one puts a JCB anywhere near it. Because if you were to rupture this, the whole supply to Exeter and beyond would be fractured. But with something like this, with a magnetometer, as you can imagine, it does rather disturb the very fine electromagnetic field, which you're trying to pick up the positive anomalies to see where ditches are and that kind of thing. What you can do, though, is to cut out the grids which actually has the pipeline going across it. And if you do that, then it does emerge. So here, once again, you can see the 3 ditches of this triple ditched enclosure coming through here, and the other corner here running around on the south side. And here you can see, and this was our most encouraging thing of all, there's a gap near this corner of the fort, and then it carries on again on the other side. So it looks like there's a gateway, which would be another good indicator this might well be a Roman fort. So with these results, we plotted out what the fort might have looked at the aerial photography, and then we thought, well, what we need to now to actually be definite this Roman fort is to use, these confirmed anomalies and select 3 places where we could put a little evaluation trenches across, and then we can actually get datable finds from these features that we've confirmed from the aerial photographs and from the geophysical survey. So we were all set to do this. We were going to do it in May 2020. But things transpired to affect the whole world at that time. So by May 2020, I was on furlough, and I didn't come off furlough again till December. So all our plans going forward were put on hold. But the general manager, Philip Smart, he was dead keen for this to happen. Certainly the Heart team were up for it, and Fiona, and so we just moved the time forward to later. So it pushed it forward to September. No, that couldn't happen then either. And eventually, by June this time last year, we were able to put our plans together. But we had to be very careful, of course, because we were only just coming out of COVID restrictions, and so everyone had to take a lateral flow test before going on the dig, and we all sat apart, and we were all quite careful about tools and that kind of thing. But based on our plans, this is what we laid out our trenches at the end of June 2021, and these 3 trenches, which we called conveniently Trench 1, Trench 2, and Trench 3, were to answer questions about what we'd found on the air photograph and on geophysics. So Trench 1 was about 30 meters long and 1.5 meters wide, and it was a section across the 3 ditches as we'd found with the geophysics, and also carrying on inside the enclosure to see whether we could pick up any kind of trench footings for possibly barrack blocks or other buildings, which were possibly traced on our geophysics, which we weren't quite sure about. This one here picks up on the terminals of the 3 ditches where they come into where we thought we saw an entrance on a magnetometer plot. And our 3rd trench, we put on just to have an indication of what all those other features on that 1984 air photograph may indicate, because there's an awful lot going on around this fort. If it is a fort, why is it here? Why choose this spot? Was there something here beforehand? Was there a large settlement here? So was there something that happened? Did they have some kind of associated settlement once the fort was in place? And did something carry on after the military disposed of the site? Could there be some kind of developing small town here or something? All those kind of normal questions you have of a fort, sorts of things you see over and over again up on Hadrian's Wall, for example, and other places like Hod Hill, which we'll look at later on. So those are the locations of our 3 trenches. We'll come back to this. This is the map we created when we were doing the geophysical survey. Every cross is 20 meters. So relocating our grid from 2019 enabled us to mark our trenches closely to where we'd found things with the geophysical survey. So this reminds us of COVID. We set our tent out. We had an open fronted mess tent. We had separate tents. Some of us stayed on site. And when everyone met for tea breaks, we had a circle of chairs spaced apart. We were as careful as we could be. And it went fine. No one caught COVID, so that was a positive result. So this had been a field. It's now in pasture, but it had been a field and ploughed for many, many years, deep ploughed. It's the red Devon soil, as you can see. It's an unforgiving type of soil. It's not great for archaeologists. Being a Dorset archaeologist, I say we have lovely chalk, and that preserves lots of bone and that kind of thing. And you get snail shells, and the pottery tends to be quite nicely preserved in it, and lots of other things tend to be as well. But the red Devon soil is acid, and it all bone, anything organic apart from charcoal and burnt bone is lost in it. And even the pottery loses its surface. It's quite a difficult soil to dig by comparison. Still, what did we find? So as you can see, here we are. We've got careful taking up of the plough soil. We've got 10 days to dig our 3 trenches with our team of people. It's been well organised by Fiona. We've got metal detectorists to check on everything that comes off in the soil. We've got people watching. We're seeing what sort of materials we're getting from this soil. Given that all the field walking that's been done in the past has not found a single Roman item. And this is what we found from our 3 trenches. We took off the top plough soil. We found iron bits of pieces from old farm machinery. We found the odd nail, bits of old stone, whiteware, willow pattern ware, odd bits of glass, slate. All a bit disappointing. Not a single Roman coin coming up in the metal detector finding. Nothing obviously military in the ironwork. So the 3rd day in, we were getting a bit concerned because we were traveling back on the surface. Nothing that we'd done, metal detected the surface we'd cleaned down onto with the machine, and nothing, no metal. I imagined, in Dorset, National Trust owns Hod Hill, and we know the records of Ian Richmond, and things that came up with ploughing when that site was ploughed back in the 19th century. Huge amounts of metalwork came out of there. So I was a bit, it was unexpected. All digs are not necessarily successful. And so sometimes you can dig a site sure that it's something and it turns out not to be. So we're very excited to find this small piece of greeny black pottery, which is the base of a vessel in the shape, quite a distinctive shape of a Roman jar. So that was a good thing. But actually seeing features in the stuff, particularly when it's dry, the red Devon soil is very, very difficult. You need to spray it with water to try and get the right features coming out of it. You're almost feeling blind in it. So I'm going to go through the different sites first. So this is our long trench, if you remember, at the field corner on the west side of the fort, going across the 3 fort ditches. And when we were excavating this, we found it quite hard because it was red sand, as I said, and actually the harder sand, the harder material we imagined was the thing the ditches were going to be cut through, and it was the softer red Devon sand itself, which would be the filling of the ditches. It turned out to be the opposite, that actually when we're going down into the natural material and leaving as the boundary, we worked it out quite quickly, but it was quite a difficult thing to get our eyes in. Also, this bottom, the right-hand side of this long trench is inside what we believe to be the fort. And so we were carefully troweling in there to see whether we could find any sort of beam slots and things for barrack blocks, as I said earlier. Next to nothing, really. We found quite an interesting circular bronze thing, but it turned out to be a post-medieval token. yeah, a fragment of nail. We were finding bits of chert and prehistoric flint, but nothing Roman at this stage. This is a view from a drone shot taken from above with Mike Calnan, who came out with his drone. He used to be head gardener for the National Trust, and he now comes out to site for us and enables us to see our sites from the air. So bottom left, you can see there's one of the fort ditches being excavated there. So eventually, by the end of the 10 days, we did actually have our 3 V-shaped fort ditches. Each one of them was about 2.5 meters from the next. They were V-shaped, as you might expect from a fortification ditch. They were about 3 meters, well, 2.5 meters wide, 1.75 meters deep. So there you are, there are the 3. And they've been ploughed down to the tops, so they are, there's nothing, none of the actual sort of old ground surface available, Roman occupied surface available. That's all been ploughed away. And the fillings of the ditch, these are the fillings of the ditch. So the outer ditch and the middle ditch were like this. So quite compacted, sandy, gravelly, mixed with the red Devon sand. We found 1 or 2 small flecks of charcoal in this. No pottery at all. Not in 2 of them anyway, not in those 2. But in the inner ditch, well, this one, yes, I'll come back to this in a minute. But in the inner ditch, you see it's much softer soil. And you could see when you were excavating, there was a greeny kind of a lens type material in it. And this we interpret as actually some kind of embankment thrown back into the ditch. And it would be, as you've got this sort of a greeny, it always looks like it's probably mixed, something like a turf rampart chucked back into the ditch. And on this side, I cleaned down this side of the ditch onto the deep red Devon sand and found 1 piece of pottery. It was a plain rim and quite hard fired. So from the middle ditch, this is our radiocarbon date from our fragment of charcoal. And you can see it's actually middle to late Iron Age. This charcoal, it was burnt. And from our piece of charcoal from the inner ditch, we get a date of around the turn of, very just on the edge of Roman occupation of Devon, and mainly tucked back into the latest Iron Age. And the piece of pottery I found too was actually late Iron Age rather than Roman. So based on these results from our 3 V-shaped ditches, you might argue that our triple ditched enclosure wasn't in fact Roman at all, that it was, it could well be late Iron Age. So that's trench 1. Not very much very helpful there. We've got our 3 ditches. We've shown how deep and wide they are, but we move on to trench 2, which is this one here at the entrance. The entrances are good places to put a trench because they're the sort of thing where everyone goes through, obviously, and stuff gets chucked into the ends of ditches much more than in another part of just a length of the fortification. So how did we get on with trench 2? Here it is, and what you can see in this picture is this feature here and this feature here. These are so what I was trying to do with this trench is to catch the ditch terminals, the very end of the terminals as you come into the hill fort, into the triple ditched enclosure. Also on this side, there was a big burnt area with a pit in it. And that feature proved to be a post pit. At the bottom of it here, you've got big lumps of stone laid down as a foundation. You can see there's a hole that goes down through here. So it's a post pipe placed in this foundation trench, packed with burnt clay. And then a surface has been laid up against it. So this is the entrance metal surface running into the enclosure. And we found lots and lots of pottery, big, chunky, coarse pieces of pottery in this. And when the pottery report came back, he said this is Batican, or it's amphory from Spain. So perhaps for wine, or perhaps for fish sauce. So yeah, so that was, if we were looking for an entrance, then this could be one of the post pits, which would have had the gateway structure and the to carry the walkway over the top of it, as we see in many other Roman forts. So so this was encouraging, but you know, it was very hard to see the different layers as we were going down, as I say. So here, so bottom left down here is the post pit I've just talked to you about, and now we have these two here. So when it rained, that was great. We could see the soil really, really well. But what distinguished this from this were finds. So that we had very few finds from this area. We just had basalt, rammed basalt for this entrance trackway coming through. But here we had the bottom of that pot I showed you earlier on, that first bit of pottery I showed you. And then we started finding bits of charcoal, large chunks of stone, and fragments of Samian and other types of pottery. From over here, we had a mortaria with grit in the bottom of it, which was very distinctive. So this is the inner ditch, which is 110, and this is the middle ditch, 112. And we just missed the outer ditch, which our trench just missed. We looked in the corner to find it, but we didn't find it. So it's just outside of our trench. So now our charcoal, what we did with it, we sent it off to the charcoal specialist, and she identified all the different charcoal. There's no point having fragments of large tree trunks, because we give you too wide a date range, because the tree would have been alive for hundreds of years before it was felled. What you need is nice round wood or little twigs. So she pulled out things like gorse, blackthorn, branch twiglets from oak trees, and then told us which ones would be good for sending off for radiocarbon dates. So we sent off 10 because the property was happy to fund all the post excavation work, of course. And we had 3 from 110 and 112, and all of those 3 dates of those pieces of charcoal all came very close together. These are 2 of them here, as you can see. So 91%, 90%, we've got from 6 AD to 122 AD. And the third one was the same, similar sort of date range. As you went to the median of those, all 3 of them, and averaged them out, it's AD 64 to 66. We had one other date from the third trench 3, which came out very, very similar. So although in radiocarbon dating, you have to be quite careful with your statistics, they were very close to one another. And if you were looking at this sort of midway point for all 3 dates, they all back each other up. And it all seems to show that those ditches were backfilled mid to late 1st century. And the pottery, of course, will then sort of enable us to sort of fine tune that slightly. So we've got Samian pottery here with a slightly decorated edge on it here, as I say, quite abraded by the effects of the Devon soil. But this is mid to late 1st century. We also got a whiteware butt beaker, which is also, according to Ed McSloy, the pottery specialist, typical of mid to late 1st century. but the closest one was this bit of mortaria, which they'd found in the legionary fortress, very similar at Exeter. And it is it's not something you find later than the 1st century. So yeah. So with these finds, this Roman pottery and the charcoal, we were pretty sort of feeling reasonably confident that what we hoped it might be as a Roman fort, was the aerial photographs seemed to say quite obviously, this is actually a Roman fort, which is something we can discuss later on, perhaps, hopefully. But what we were surprised to find underneath this trench too was so much flint. And if you saw on that 1984 aerial photograph, there's lots of other features here. Not all of them are Roman. And this particular, we found the barbed and tanged arrowheads. We found lots of long blades of flint. And we found this pit cutting into surface about 15 centimeters below the Roman fort layer. And this site contained lots of microliths, which look as though they could be Mesolithic. So there were odd fragments of Bronze Age and Neolithic pottery and Iron Age pottery, which we found scattered across our excavations, usually redeposited. But this pit seemed to be a nice sealed deposit. So we took radiocarbon samples from the top, middle, and bottom of the pit. And we sent the flints off, and Olaf, the flint specialist, he said, yes, these do look Mesolithic in their lithic technology. And one of our 4 dates came back as 95% or 80, yeah, between 80,537 and 8,297. So yeah, pretty impressive Mesolithic date. But the others came back as on the very cusp between Mesolithic and the earliest Neolithic, as you might expect in the Devon area. Yeah, it looks like that's the date of the pit, but they've scraped up material from roundabout. So there's an earlier Mesolithic background to this pit. So yeah, it says something, doesn't it, of the intensity of occupation in this one area. We've bumped into something we didn't expect to find at all. Still, that's not what this talk's about, but it gives the context of the place further interest. So here we are back at this aerial photograph that started it all off, and you see we've done our trench through here. We've done our trench at the entrance through here, just outside this quarry here. The third trench was to try and pick up on this feature running through here. You see this dark line? How does that relate to the fort? It seems to run right through. You see it on the other side of the quarry here, and then turns a corner and runs out towards the M5 motorway, which is what this is over here. So yeah, not easy to hit it, but we did. So this is trench 3. This is what I hope to do using my grid from the geophysics, and the trench and the line of the on the aerial photograph runs through this. It's just 6 meter by 6 meter trench. There it is. That's the line of the Roman fort coming around like this, and there's the entrance one we've just talked about here. And it was deep. Yeah, the ploughsoil was deep, and the actual stratified archaeology. So we just concentrated on a 1.5 meter wide bit, 6 meter long, and we picked up not 1 ditch but 2 ditches. So not everything we could see on the aerial photograph wasn't the only thing that was buried there. There are other features which are not visible on the aerial photograph, as you might imagine. So we came into this, and we did find material in it. In fact, there was much more material in this pottery than we found in trench 1 or 2. This is the kind of material we were getting. So quite short rimmed vessels, bead-rimmed vessels. Southwest black burnished ware, south Devon ware. We were getting grey wares. We were also getting southeast Dorset black burnished wares as well, and odd fragments, small fragments of Samian. One coin, but it was really, really embraided. It wasn't necessarily a particularly chunky coin as you might expect in the 1st and 2nd century AD, but it hasn't been identified. So this pottery is mainly 1st century, but some of it is late 1st, early 2nd. One or two pieces are 140 and later AD, so mid to late 2nd century. So we had one piece of charcoal from layer 208 here. So you can see the deep ditch, which we never bottomed, but it goes down. This is the bedrock going down through here. One bit of charcoal came from 208, which is fixed in there. And that came out as similar to the ones we found in Trench 2. So this sort of early 1st to early 2nd AD, but in the middle it's about 70 AD. So this is what Ed McCloy said about the pottery that he found from the trench. There's South Gaulish ware, and some of it East Gaulish ware dating from AD 140. So although the fort's ditches seem to be backfilled in the mid to late 1st century, people are still occupying this area and dropping pottery at a later date. Yeah, so there we have a photograph of this more soily cutting of this feature here. So this is where the mid 1st century date comes from, cutting through this area. Yeah, so that is so it was all. We really had 10 days. We extracted the information to try and evaluate what this site was about. Killerton estate brought us lots of cider. Because of COVID, they produced lots from their orchards and didn't have anyone to drink it. So they kept us well supplied, which was great. So I spent an evening drawing that on the last day. So what can we say from this? We found from Trench 1 there are traces of earlier material, pre-Roman. So we're getting sort of mid to late Iron Age coming from here. We know from this ditch here that we're getting early to mid 2nd century material. And we know from our entranceway that those terminals of the ditches were backfilled at a pretty consistent time in the later 1st century. But while we were working on the site, some of the Hart volunteers did geophysical survey across here and extended our resistivity survey. But we've done nothing over here, for example. You can see there are, what are these long ditches here? And what's all this about, this mottled area down through here? There seems to be circular things down here. So the research goes on, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. But something about the site and something about its context in that it looks out back towards Exeter, the city of Exeter, where of course the 2nd Legion Augustan legionary fortress was for a while, and Topsham and Exmouth and places like that, where the supply ships would have come in. So there's a fort at Topsham where boats would be unloaded and then material brought into the legionary fortress and then on presumably to the other forts in the area. I know you're a Roman road society, so I wanted to say something. I did promise that I would say something about any evidence of roads in the area. So our site is over here. That's Killerton House there. This is the Turnpark Road. This is our earliest map of Killerton, dating 1756. And it's before the park is extended at Killerton. All these field boundaries have gone now. So there are records, Saxon records, of a here path that goes through here. People have wondered whether this was in fact a potentially a Roman routeway. But looking at this on the map, you know, there's Killerton House is down here. There's Dolbury Hill Fort, the Iron Age hill fort. There's the spur of ground that runs down where the fort is sitting on just the southern slope of and slightly on the crest of here. And this is the line of this route, but all this area is in parks now. This earthwork here is part of possibly that original route. But there's something about the field systems and the way they respect or the line of the road that I wonder whether it's true or not. But that might be something you want to discuss later on. But you can see it as a location for a fort. It sits on a spur. It looks very much like Wadden Hill in West Dorset, where it sits on a spur beneath Lewiston Hill, where there's a small hill fort. And here is the Dolbury Hill Fort, which is the local obvious Iron Age fortified place in the area. So as I say, I'm a Dorset archaeologist. You know, I've trained and raised in Dorset, and my PhD is on the Durotriges, which are the eastern neighbours of the Dumnonii. Before working in Killerton, I rarely crossed the boundary, and so my knowledge is really about places like South Cadbury in Somerset, Ham Hill in Somerset, where there are good evidence of Roman fortified places. And obviously, you know, I started with the National Trust on the Kingston Lacey estate, which is near Wimborne in East Dorset. And that area has this huge legionary fortress. So we know about what Suetonius says about Vespasian, legate of the Second Legion Augusta, first person to be mentioned in any reference to the people of Dorset. He probably comes from the area of which is now on Fishbourne, captures the Isle of Wight, fights many battles, captures many oppida, and we know that there is a supply base at Hamworthy. Here's Poole Harbour down here. Peter Bellamy excavated one here. So like Topsham in Devon, they would have needed all their infrastructure, be able to bring all their supplies in, and then move up towards the River Stour up here. And there's a Roman road that takes you right up there. And there, just near it, this is Bournemouth University's recent geophysical survey of the legionary fortress at Wimborne. And you can see how huge it is. And you can see the barrack blocks here and the drains and things that link it off, and the roads. Huge amount that can be said about that. But it lies on the edge of the Stour here. The next place up is Badbury Rings. We found ballista bolts at Badbury Rings. And then you have Hod Hill, which lies to the north, tucked into the top corner of the Iron Age hill fort, with good evidence from Ian Richmond's excavations. Everyone was pushed out and moved down into the River Ewan, down in the valley, and the fort was occupied for about 10 years or so. There's good coinage, there's good pottery, particularly the same in very datable. And then they moved west. Now, Bill Putnam, who supervised me at Weymouth College, he always believed there was a Roman fort at Dorchester. There probably was, but it hasn't been located there yet. And further west, you have Hod Hill. I mean, you have Wadden Hill, right on the Devon border. And there are other sites probably at Axminster. Honiton. and Hembury. So even outside this drawing, there are extra links. You know, Cullompton has one. So it's surprising suddenly from my Dorset world, where you have a few sparse hill forts, the Geophysical seem to be mopped up pretty quickly and settled down. You've got about 25 to 30 quite nice villas in Dorset. And then you move into Devon, and I tried to count them up, how many villas evidence there are in Devon. They all tend to be tucked down in the southeast corner. And that's about 4 or 5, I think. People can correct me, but you know, the whole thing's turned topsy-turvy because there's probably about 25, 30. There's probably more to be found of Roman forts in Devon. So what was going on here? And when you read some of the excavation reports, I'm not a specialist in this. Chris Smart will be able to tell you a lot more. But you know, they weren't all just occupied for about 10 years. Some of them, it seems like, particularly the one up at when they excavated the one up at Tiverton, it seemed to have more than one occupation there, almost as if the site was never quite cleared up. That there was always things rumbling along here. That Romanitis wasn't something the Devon people caved in and accepted easily. And of course, there's the famous story, isn't there, which has to be repeated, about the legate of the Second Legion Augusta in Devon, in Exeter, who refused or decided against his better judgment to go east to join the other legions when the Boudiccan revolt happened, and he didn't expect there was any chance of succeeding given the setbacks the Roman military had up to that point. And I guess he was fully engaged. This conflict in the Devon area hadn't been resolved. Perhaps the locals had risen up even more. So perhaps a section of the Geophysical did the same thing. Who knows? But when the Roman army was victorious and Boudicca was defeated, and we know from Tacitus that the legate took his own life because of the shame of not answering the governor's call. So yes, fascinating story, and it was interesting and exciting to add a little bit more at Killerton when we dug there. But as I say, it's not the end of the story, and we're fortunate in being able to work with Exeter University because Naomi Sykes and groups of students this summer have been working on the Killerton estate and increasing the geophysics they're doing, and hopefully in the next year or so we may get an opportunity to get more excavation, more information from some of these other features to try and answer the question about why is the fort here? Is there a settlement associated with it? How long did this site get occupied for? So yeah, fascinating. And we've just moved, like in all archaeology, we've moved things forward a little bit more. Yeah, so I hope that was interesting.
Yes, thank you very much. That certainly was interesting, and you've really been at the centre of things there, discovering really quite a lot. One thing that intrigued me was you mentioning the Iron Age fort in the vicinity. Do you have any indication whether the Iron Age fort was still occupied in Roman times? Whether the fort could possibly have been located because it was close to the Iron Age fort, or was that just fortuitous?
Well, unfortunately, this is part of what Exeter University is doing as well. I mean, they're doing a geophysical survey up there, and it's never been excavated. But we have records of flint being turned up there, so we know there's Mesolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age flint associated with it, but we know very little about the site. But as I say, it does remind me of other sites where Roman fortifications are sited quite close to Iron Age sites, but whether that's because they are just naturally the best place to put things, or whether they're continuously occupied. We know the Iron Age people were there, certainly at Hod Hill in Dorset, so one might expect that it was still occupied or reoccupied as the military advanced through Devon. But I'm afraid that's all I can say.
And I was interested also to see that the fort entrance is not where perhaps naively I would have expected it to be, which was in the centre of the side. Was there any particular reason, because of the topography of the site or anything else, that the entrance wasn't there?
No, it's a quirky fort. It's not. I in my representations, my drawing is better. You know, that pencil drawing is better because it's not actually a sort of a properly sort of rectilinear playing card shape. It's a bit sort of bent. So that corner is more of an angle. It's not a 90-degree type angle. So yes, yeah, it's already quirky, and you're right. It's not central to that side of the fort. We don't have any other entrances that we know of, but hopefully.
Which again is unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean the geophysics wasn't brilliant, was it? It didn't yield to us everything we hoped it would yield. It gave us extra fragments. It's been quite badly damaged by ploughing the site, and the northern bit up by the hedge boundary at the top, the highest point, has been crossed by trees and is affected by plantation and stuff, and quite bad agricultural activity. So it's not easy to survey up that end. So we don't have that northern end.
From what you say, you were quite happy to conclude in the end that your triple ditched enclosure was actually a fort.
Yes, I'm willing to defend that. Yes, I mean, people may disagree. They may say, "Oh, well, actually, just because you got first century Roman pottery, given that Roman pottery is very, very rare, it's the only place on the whole of the Killerton estate where we've got anything Roman at all. So it looks like a Roman fort. There's dates of material and the types of pottery you'd expect in a Roman fort at the time of when you would expect Devon to be occupied. We've got those really nice radiocarbon dates. So I think we can certainly make a case. Yeah, I think it is, yes.
Mike Hicken has a question, which is with regard to the 2nd century occupation of the site, because you did say that the ditches were backfilled before the end of the 1st century. So do you have any suggestions about what that 2nd century occupation may have been?
Well, it's outside the Roman fort. It's that huge great ditch that we just sampled with that small trench. So that part, that exterior part, it's really to try and say something about what all those features were on the aerial photograph. So we just really dipped our toe in, really. But looking at it, I imagined that it was the pottery was all 1st century, but no, the pottery specialists said that several pieces were very different from the terminals of the ditches of the Roman fort, that they were, yeah, early to mid 2nd century, perhaps later 2nd century. So yes, that does, given the rarity of Roman pottery, that sort of opens up new questions, doesn't it? Which I can't answer, but it shows that the soldiers didn't just go away. It amazes me how clean it is, how hard it was to find things there compared to other Roman sites. Perhaps they had a very disciplinarian commander or something that cleared everything away and put it somewhere where we didn't look. I don't know.
Well, that itself is interesting, the fact that you found no iron bits, or at least they really weren't showing up. Do you think it was occupied for a very short period, or do you have a different interpretation?
That's my sense. That was my sense, that it wasn't occupied for long. Neither did we find anything. We didn't, in our long trench, we didn't find any kind of indications of beam slots or anything. Nothing. So, you know, I suppose the Romans could throw these up pretty quickly, and they didn't necessarily occupy them for that long. We did find a few nail fragments, but that's all, nothing military. Yeah.
I don't know if we have anyone else who's watching who would like to put in questions. Now is the time, whilst we, oh, I see that we've got another one here, which is, oh yes, Mike is asking this one too. Difficult question for you, perhaps. Is the later 1st century backfilling of the fort ditch typical of other sites in Devon? And is the triple ditch a common feature of forts in Devon?
You do see them, yes. They are. There are other forts in Devon. Some of them are double ditched, some of them are single ditched, some of them are triple ditched. So they do vary, and then some of them are a bit quirky, like this one. And they generally seem to be 60s and 70s, but there seems to be sometimes an 80s to 90s occupation as well. So some excavators have suggested that, and you do sometimes get more than one enclosure, one site, as you might get in somewhere like up near Hadrian's Wall, like they come back and occupy again. There is a sort of sense I get from reading the reports that it's a longish period of time, and it's not settled briefly like in Dorset, that there are sort of uprisings and repositionings that they come back and occupy again. Yeah, but I mean, it's not my specialist area, so there are others who might be able to comment and give you a better idea. Perhaps some of your people from Devon on the tonight. Yeah. Yeah,
yes,
I noticed.
If there is anyone from Devon who is knowledgeable about this, let us know.
I see there's a hand up from Nicholas Savage. I don't know.
Hi, yeah, if I can, I'd just like to say I can't seem to use the chat function. It seems to have been disabled for me. I don't know if that's generally, which might explain why there's a lack of questions. But yeah, I'm actually live in Killerton, so I'm sort of very interested in the sort of potential relationship of this site with the one at Killerton that's just up the road, because there's some very interesting parallels. So with that one, it seems to have been a fairly sort of short-lived fort, whereas the settlement was slightly outside it, and it seems to have been later and carried on through the through the second and third centuries, possibly, from the evidence we have of a site that was excavated there fairly recently. So, I mean, is there any more you can say about the relationship potentially of these sites, or is that not something you've thought about yet?
Oh, well, yes, I did see the one at Cullompton. Yes, because I mean, every time I go to Killerton, I go through Cullompton on the way out.
Of course, there. Yes.
And I said, oh, good, there's one at Cullompton. I did read the piece on it. I should have gone back over all the records when I was doing the report, and so I would be really sharp on it. But I got that sort of sense, Nicholas, that there were settlements associated with these places. I'm not sure whether it was Cullompton. Doesn't sound like it. That sometimes they were reoccupied. And so, yeah, I think it's fascinating, and Henbury, Henbury Hill Fort is not far, is it? I mean,
no, Henbury's very close, and that's an interesting one because that's where they actually put the Roman fort is in the Iron Age fort.
Yes, that's right.
But of course, the other, it looks like there were several phases at Killerton, at least 2 phases to the fort on the hill above the town, but the later civilian settlement seems to have been somewhat away. But I think there might have been a road between Killerton and Cullompton, because there's a very telling alignment. There isn't the main road now, but lines very well with the road from Killerton. It's a very nice straight line, actually, if you look at it now on a map, and the road sort of veers away towards what is probably a Saxon settlement where the church is now, just before you get to it. So there's some very interesting potential alignments there.
That's good.
And this is all just me as a complete amateur staring at some maps, So it'd be really interesting to get some people who actually know what they're talking about involved.
I think there's huge potential to understand things better, and I know Chris Smart's doing that. But yeah, I think look at each site, and there is that sort of sense that this is like a frontier area. I think the one up, I think it's Bollum, I think it is the one up by Knightsays and Tiverton. That one they think is two phases running up to the end of the first century. So it was sort of, it was occupied more than once, or at least it had to be reoccupied or realigned, extended. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a number. Yeah.
We do have one or two people with hands up, so it may be that other people are finding difficulty with the chat function. So if I could ask Kevin Cook just to unmute and ask a question.
Hello there. Yeah, just to say, yes, my screen is showing disabled chat as well, so I expect that's with everybody else. Yeah, question. Lack of geophys buildings inside the fort. Have you looked to see if there are buildings inside, and if not, could the fort have been built from the legions based in Exeter as just a training camp to go out to now and again?
Yeah, yeah, it's there are forts quite close into Exeter, aren't there? There are, so it's a potential, I suppose, but I don't think so. We didn't look very much. The geophysics isn't brilliant, and our trench didn't show anything. Doesn't mean there isn't anything there, but it meant that the evidence may have been ploughed out. Perhaps it was a tented area. I don't know. There's lots of different a lot of different interpretations, isn't there, Kevin? So that's another one. Yeah, potential, but I can't answer one way or the other.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Stevenson, you had your hand up, so if you'd like to unmute. And by the way, I've seen a message that it looks like chat is re-enabled, so we might be back on with that. But anyway, Andy Stevenson.
Okay, my question goes back to something that Nick was talking about. There's also a very interesting line going west from there, which sort of directly passes the villa at Crediton and then goes on to North Taunton. Is there a possibility that a road would have branched out west from there? It's on a direct line almost. And if you go east, it then goes to sort of Honiton as well, all on a direct line.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. I mean, we have so many of these forts now. It'd be good to see how they all connected. I've seen nothing apart from what I showed you on that map that shows, on the ground where roads may have gone to and from. But yeah, it's a nice idea.
We've got several coming up on chat now as well, but Mark Willingale, you've got your hand up. So if we do one last one audio, and then we'll go back to the chat.
Okay, I did actually put it into the chat as well, Rob. Thank you. Excellent talk. I was just going to ask, on the hillside where the fort is located, it looks to be able to be a look back towards Exeter. And it's a river, and in my experience, the advance of the invasion follows the river systems. So could it be an early fort that's actually pushing its way up the frontier, up that river, and visible from Exeter?
Yes, it could be. Yeah. It's I think it's one of the fascinating things is the fact that how many fortifications there are around Exeter. Whether or not
it's not so far, you see. What's interesting, it's not so very far, is it, from Exeter?
No.
One photograph looking back, I believe, although I couldn't see, but it looks close enough in a kind of Hadrian's Wall situation to be able to communicate between the main legionary base at Exeter and to push forward up inland on that line.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, certainly with the Killerton estate, we're having the edge of Exeter creeping into the edge of the estate, so it's so close.
Yes.
So I think that whole sort of supply route down up through Exmouth, Topsham, and all that kind of thing. It just needs a lot of work. I think it'd be really good to really look into this, don't you think? Just to work on just the way you're thinking.
Well, it's a bit John Porterish that the hillside is looking back, but also high enough to look forward into the valley to start controlling to the north. That just seems to be the sort of geography of the location.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Yes, I would have expected to be on the crown of the hill, but it's not. It has this
It's strange, isn't it?
Awkward sloping thing, which is not the reason. Yeah,
that's the thing. It's looking backwards as much as it is more, if anything, than looking forward. It's slightly sort of defensive looking. It sort of forces your view that life was difficult, and the reason that the guy didn't go to help in the Budokan event was that actually there was trouble, and they were still in the process of taking control.
Yes, I wonder.
Interesting, and a very good talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I've got a question from Steve, who's obviously been spotting things carefully. Do you have any ideas why there were 2 ditches in the southwest corner? I'm assuming that's instead of 3.
The whole of, as far as we know it, the whole of the fortification circuit has 3 ditches. But I wonder whether the question you mean is that our trench 3, that was a deep ditch cutting a narrower ditch, which is not to do with the fort as far as we know, or it might be an outer defense for the whole fortification system. That that is part of the complicated, air photograph plot, which we've barely started to unravel. But obviously, there was a ditch. They made a much bigger and deeper one at a later date. And as far as the aerial photograph is concerned, there seems to be 1 ditch, but it goes for a long, long way and seems to go all the way around the bottom edge of where the fortification is. So
you're emphasising that we're not at the end of the story with this yet. There's more to discover.
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, we could all. It's nice to speculate, but all I can say is the evidence that we came across. Yeah.
I've got several people just saying thank you for the fascinating talk. Really enjoyed it. I've got Delwyn Matthews who's saying thank you for that presentation. I was one of the half volunteers.
Yes, Delwyn.
John Salvatore from DAS has done a lot of work into Roman military history. And there was definitely a lot of military infrastructure in this exited area. We fought at Topsham. Also, another fort was found in Exeter about 2 years ago, just outside the main base.
Yeah, so that was the interesting thing about good to hear from Delwyn. Yes, it was good to work with you at Bud Lake. Yeah, but
we do like to get people back together again. Yeah.
But yeah, that was the fascinating thing when I was looking into it. That they were even tight into Exeter. It seemed unnecessary with a legionary fortress, an unnecessary number of other forts around about, almost though they were sort of outworks. That they were so insecure there that they needed to have outposts to sort of keep an eye on, while they were trying to set up their forward base, their legionary base there. So yeah, I get a sort of sense, and I may be wrong, that it's like an insecure place.
Got a question from Philip Bevan saying, was any archaeology done when the M5 was constructed? Do you know about that?
Well, there's nothing, no, unfortunately, nothing, nor when that great big gas pipeline went through either. So we didn't even know it was there until we started our work. So there were huge opportunities to find out stuff at a different time, but no, neither the M5 or the gas pipeline, unfortunately. So we're a bit blind, unfortunately, as far as that's concerned.
Oh, and Steve was clarifying about the 2 ditches. He was meaning ditches outside.
Yes, I thought that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And again from Tyrone Hope saying, excellent presentation. Thank you. So yes, as far as I can see, that is it, unless anyone puts another one on quickly. So it falls to me saying, Martin, thank you really very, very much. It was fascinating. You've obviously been right at the centre of this with discovering a great deal. You've moved things on there, but there is clearly still more to go in discovering things.
Yes, it was meant to be on Time Team. We had filming, so who knows, it might turn up. You might actually see it at some
Oh,
stage, but
right.
they didn't put it on the lot series. Unfortunately, they concentrated on other things. So, but you never know; it might be shown at some stage, and you might see the whole thing happening in action.
I ought just to let Steve have a word because I think
digging for Britain.
He wants to clarify what he's saying. So, Steve, if you do want to have a word, just unmute and quickly put that question in.
The other question, actually, the question I had was that given what Martin's saying about this was on the frontier, it was a very fluid situation. It's a triple ditch fort. It's sort of intriguing that there's no military fines.
Yes, that's right.
That's odd. There's 3 ditches and it's in this broad frontier area, and yet we didn't find any evidence of military hardware. Is it just that we happened not to look in the right place?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I keep going back to Hod Hill, which I know a lot better, and there was just stuff full of stuff, lovely sort of sword scabbards and javelin heads and all these kinds of things. And and really, you saw the metal detectors. We felt sure we were going to bump into that straight away, but didn't happen. No. Yeah, so yeah, but it was a small trench.
Yes,
there's lots we didn't see, so I guess we,
I mean,
maybe there somewhere.
If you get a chance to go back, will you be looking inside the fort, or you're more interested in what's going on outside? Those other parts of the field?
I think so. But I think it's going to be Exeter University. I'm going to encourage them to sort of use their. Unfortunately, I'm quite stretched, so I've done my initial bit, but I will rely on the Heart team working with Exeter University from now on. But yes, I will certainly encourage that. I think there's a lot more to be discovered. Sorry, I said time team. I meant digging for Britain. So it may come up on that sometime.
Oh, digging for Britain, right? Because I've got a number of people. Well, excellent presentation. Many thanks and good night. Outstanding. Thank you. Someone, Wesley, wondering if RAF bases, etc., are over Roman facilities. Thanks, excellent presentation, very interesting. From Keith Lambert. Amy Stevenson, thanks very much. As usual, one discovery raises many more questions. We've got Martin Packer saying there's a time team patron. I'll try and raise it. Did you say it wasn't time team?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I saw that come up, and I'm sorry. I'm so used to saying that. No, it's digging for Britain. They came out and filmed it, and but they haven't used the material yet.
Yeah. And one question saying, did the Romans use local slave labour? So we don't know, really.
We don't know, but I would expect so. Yeah.
And Mark, many thanks for an exceptionally interesting presentation. And it does appear to support your view that this was part of a system to secure a difficult region. Right, well, on behalf of us all, Martin, thank you very much.